Yeah, go ahead.
So, John, welcome to Ranching Reboot. How are you today, man?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So here we are recording kind of about the middle of October, and I'm finally starting to get my hay delivered.
Yeah. I just let's see. I just got about 120 bales of improved jigs delivered to my place, which is nice, and we were able to get the USDA to kind of I guess reimburse us for the loaded miles, which was nice.
Is that one of those drought relief programs?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Okay, cool. So, well, but before we get like too far deep into the weeds, so you're Jon Tipton.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about where you're at and about your operation. We can start
S-
chasing rabbits from there.
So I'll start from the beginning. My dad bought 46 acres in Lavaca County, Texas, which is in Hallettsville. He bought that place in 1980. He had commercial herd. I remember him saying he had like a Hereford bull at one point. And then he started getting into beef masters in 1985. And from his good friend and mentor, who was a Beefmaster Breeders Universal charter member at the time, and uh, their herd kind of that gentleman's name was Leon Barnes Sr. of Brushy Creek Beefmasters. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he was a very great mind. I grew up with him. Knowing him, he knew me, and that's kind of how we got started. Um, and we just, growing up, I always knew that I wanted to raise beefmaster cattle. It's all I knew. I was born in '88, so I was luckily born into it.
Okay.
Um, so it's just aside from, I've always had this goal in mind when I was a kid that I wanted to have a big ranch. I wanted beefmaster cattle, and I wanted to raise a family on that ranch too. So that's one goal that I've never set aside or put in the back seat or gotten rid of. I've always kept that goal in mind, and it's still in the works. I'm about to get married in December.
Congratulations.
I appreciate that, and I'm just trying to hone in on my craft and get better at beefmaster cattle.
Awesome. So, what's the land base you're on? You said you started with about 40 acres or so, 60,
It's
40.
it's at 46,
Okay.
and we still have that place. Um, and then we lease about 120. I don't know, about 20 minutes away, just northwest of Schulenburg. Um, and then I have 85 acres in Anahuac, Texas, which is 3 hours east. It's between Baytown and Beaumont, but we don't keep cattle down there because I got tired of evacuating cattle because of hurricanes. It's like right on the coast, so I got
Okay.
one.
Help me orient. You said you're
Mhm.
at Hallettsville.
Yes, sir.
So where's that in Texas?
Okay, so I grew up in Houston. It's so Hallettsville. If you go an hour and a half west of Houston on I-10, you hit Schulenburg, Texas. Exit Schulenburg, go south on 77 about 10-15 minutes. That's where our place is, and then
So
Hallettsville.
would you call that South Texas or Central
Yeah, I
Coast?
do. I call it
Okay.
South Texas. Um, and so our place is about 10 minutes south of Schulenburg on 77, and then Hallettsville's 20 minutes south of Schulenburg on 77. So I'm kind of halfway between Schulenburg and Hallettsville.
Okay. Yeah, I can start naming off a bunch of towns in Kansas, and even less people will
Hmm.
have heard of them.
Right.
All right. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're talking about the different properties you had. You said you had one about
Okay,
3 hours
so
away.
the property in Anahuac, it's I don't know, about an hour east of Houston, and so by that time you start to get real close to the bay. And so we bought that place in June of '99. Um, and so it's best hunting property in Texas, in my opinion. You can cover anything. They got gators, they got waterfowl, ducks, geese, everything. They got deer, hogs, anything you can think of. It's to me, it's the hunting mecca of Texas.
There's
Uh,
gators around Houston.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, we're kind of a bayou, I guess you could say.
I
It's
didn't know.
it's
I never thought about it, but I mean, it makes sense that there'd be gators in Southeast Texas.
Oh
That,
yeah, right on the coast. It's there's a lot of gators. I would consider that area, which is where Anahuac is. It's Chambers County, Texas. I would consider that like the Louisiana of Texas. It is. It feels more like Louisiana than anywhere else in Texas. Um, you know, pretty much from there on east, going along I-10, there's a lot of swamps, you know, marshy areas. They not so much anymore, but they still do it some. They did a lot of rice farming, and stuff like that. But it's very much a hunting region of Texas.
okay. Um, so back to your main place. Like I'm familiar with where Kingsville is, where
A little
Hungerford
bit.
is.
Let me see. I would. It's a few hours north because I know like Houston and where the ranch is. It's about I don't know 6 hours from the border, Rio Grande City border.
Okay.
Um, so I'd say Kingsville is roughly 3 hours south. Um,
So you're up there a little closer to San Antonio. I mean, we could quit playing
well,
Texas geography whenever you want.
well, no. So the easiest way I can put it for people is it's exactly halfway between Houston and San Antonio on I-10, and then go south about 15 minutes.
Okay. Okay. That works. I like to tell people that I'm like, when I start naming towns in Kansas, like,
Hmm.
I just get blank looks. I'm like, all right, look, I'm 20 miles from Oklahoma, halfway from Colorado to Missouri.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um, so that's the land that covers the land.
Right.
Seems like that seems like you're gonna have to spend a lot of time on the road
I
moving
did,
around.
and so that's why I kind of quit put bringing cattle to Anahuac because, and it was nice whenever I didn't have whenever there was a serious drought in Hallettsville because the thing about Hallettsville is it during the fall and spring grass is good. Um, in the winter, if you plant winter grass, it's good in certain places, but it also depends on pasture management. But in the summer, it is brutal. It's so our summer is like y'all's winter. It becomes very droughty. Right now we're at the worst drought that we've ever had, and it's pretty bad.
Oh, trust me, John. I feel that. I feel that.
I think everyone does.
So just a few days ago, back in mid-October, the National Weather Service put out a graphic of the state of Kansas of how
Mhm.
far behind everybody was on rain. And
Correct.
of course, the blue colors are pretty close to normal or slightly above, and the
Yeah.
red is anything red or orange is below.
Hmm.
Probably 75% of the state was some form of red, and there was a lot of almost black on there. And there's one spot on the map that's minus 15.73 inches behind normal.
Oof, that's
That's
bad.
where I'm at. So
That's
I
not good,
posted
man.
that. One of my friends from over Flint Hills was like, "Yeah, I'm that dot that's minus 17.9." I said, "Well, yeah, but you get like twice the rain that I normally get 150 miles away. So
Hmm.
17 back for you, it's bad. I get it.
Yeah.
But it's probably not quite as bad as, almost 13 back for me."
Hmm.
So it's
And to kind of help people understand, I not too long ago I posted videos of how bad the drought conditions were on TikTok, you know, and I would say, like in one of those videos I showed where the water line would be as if that tank were full. And this is at my place, our lease place, right by Schulenburg. And so I mean, it was a good 30 yards uh receded. I mean,
okay. We got to deal with a little bit of vocabulary here.
mhm,
You're saying tank. And when you say tank, I think of a 16-foot fiberglass tank because
mhm.
that's my paradigm. Or I think of, a metal
Yeah,
tank or some kind of fiberglass tank sitting on the ground or, dug
mhm,
slightly in. You're talking about a pond.
Correct. Yeah,
A dirt tank.
that's kind of a Texas terminology for pond, lake, whatever. Well, a pond is smaller than a lake, so you probably call it a pond. But yeah, we call it a tank. I mean, that's just kind of how I grew up hearing it. So,
And my buddy from Arizona, Ed Brecker, he corrected me. He educated me a few years ago. He's like, no, that's a tank. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's a pond, Ed. And he's, no, that's a dirt tank. We call them dirt tanks.
right.
Okay, fine, you Arizona weirdo. I get it.
Yeah.
Guys down in Southwest do stuff a little bit different. So,
right.
So drought planning. You mentioned, your place in Hallettsville. When it's bad there, you've got some other property farther east that you can go to.
We could, and traditionally we have, but at those times when we have needed that property, sometimes it would be during the middle of hurricane season, and
that's probably less than ideal.
Right. And so I would say there's been a few times where I've had to pack those cows up and haul them back, but I forget what the name of the hurricane was, but because like usually, because both places in Anahuac and Hallettsville, we go off of I-10, because the place in Anahuac, it's, I don't know, 15 minutes south of I-10, and so we just go on I-10 and go towards Hallettsville or vice versa. But there'd be hurricanes where you would have people from all over just stopped on I-10 for hours and hours and hours, not moving where they were in place. And
like
so
the traffic wasn't moving, or people were just stopped because they were.
Well, the traffic just wasn't stopped. Like that, you'd have cars just lined up on I-10 trying to get out of the coast. And at one point, the last time I did it, me and my buddy helped me, and so because normally that drive takes about 3 hours. If I remember correctly, that drive took us at least 6 hours.
Ugh.
And so we had to go through back roads and all this crap, and I'm just like, I'm not doing this again. So we don't have cattle down in Anahuac anymore because of that. But and so now it's just hunting property and a financial resource.
Okay, fair enough. I was just kind of reminded of a hurricane that I had to ride through when I was in the Navy in Virginia. And generally, if you're assigned to a ship and there's a storm coming, you just leave, because you can run away at sea. I mean,
right.
You could generally run faster than a hurricane can catch you. But our boat was in the shipyards, so we weren't going anywhere.
Oh man.
Yeah. And it ended up like the main body of the storm was supposed to come right through where I lived, and right through Norfolk, Virginia Beach area.
Right.
So my buddy Richard, he had a place out in the country about an hour away, little town, I think it was called Dendron. And he was like, well, hey, it's not supposed to be bad out there. Just come out to Dendron. We'll ride the storm out. Cool. So we went out there, and the storm decided it was going to shift its track a little bit farther to the left than they thought it would. And the eye came right over us. And it turns out where I lived in Virginia Beach, barely got hit. So we had to ride out the worst of the storm. And, you've dealt with hurricanes. There's always trees down, blocking roads, power lines down. We had to work for pretty much a half a day just so we could get out of town. And then it took us another half a day to make the hour and a half drive back to Virginia Beach. So we first started going south and started running into closed roads and flooding. We're like, okay, well, we'll just box around all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah, that didn't work. We ended up having to go all the way back to the north, all the way back around Richmond. Hurricane traffic patterns are not fun. It's a lot easier when they just call you up and like, yep, storm coming, get on the boat, we're going.
Yeah.
Well, and that's when you just hope your car's still at the base when you get back.
That's for sure. I remember when Harvey hit Houston, you had a lot of people from Louisiana in their airboats, what they called them, the Cajun Navy, came to help rescue teams and stuff like that. I mean, you'd have cars all over underwater. I had at my parents' house, it water was inches from the door, and some of it was flooding into the back door. And we were sitting there with the shop vac just hosing out water for hours, and I didn't get much sleep those few nights for sure.
I can imagine. I can imagine. All right.
Mhm.
Moving on. Let's circle back to beef masters. Let's talk about beef master cattle, and I guess start with breed history and kind of end with why they're cool.
Okay. Beef Masters, they were developed by Tom Lasser in 1931. He closed his herd in 1937, and then they became recognized in 1954. Um, they were developed on 6 characteristics, which is weight conformation, hardiness, milking ability, fertility, and disposition. And those are the kind of criteria I think that don't just apply to beef masters, but I mean, they can apply to any cattleman. Weight's important because that's what gets you paid. Conformation, you have to have a good sound animal with good feet and legs, lots of muscle. Um, you know,
Some of that's probably also consistency in the shape and size of the cuts.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, and the way Tom Lasser defined it was the type on the hook.
Right.
Which I think is very applicable to commercial cattlemen in the seed stock business. A lot of it's visual appraisal, because what makes money in the seed stock business as well is based on how that animal looks. People want to be able to buy something what they like to look at. And then you got hardiness, which you have to have an animal that can withhold poor conditions. Um, for example, this drought, my cattle they're not in perfect condition by any means, but they're not in poor condition. And, my pastures look like golf greens, except they're brown and dead. And then milking ability, you have to have a cow that has a good sound udder, small teats for that calf to be able to nurse on its own. But she has to be able to convert that milk into pounds on that calf. And fertility, without that cow breeding, we wouldn't be making money. She has to be able to breed back with that calf at side. Too many people make excuses saying, oh, she's not bred back because she has that calf at side. Well, she's not making you money. That's costing you money.
Yeah, like take away all of our bullshit, all of our fences,
Correct.
all of our corrals, all the AI,
Mm-hmm.
And then what's what? Take away all the inputs and let's see what gets bred
Right.
in someone else's commercial herd.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one, disposition. You don't want to be around cattle that are going to hurt you. I mean, you have to have animals that are easy to work with. Disposition also applies to carcass quality. When they're sitting there running around high head, they're going to waste that marbling.
And they're going to be, that's an animal that's in higher stress.
Right.
And when an animal is experiencing a state of high stress, they're not gaining weight.
Correct. Correct. Um, and then so moving on, the original genetic makeup of beef masters is 1/2 Boss Taurus and 1/2 Boss Indicus. The Boss Taurus comes from Hereford and Shorthorns. Milking Shorthorns specifically.
Okay.
To kind of improve that udder quality. And then the Boss Indicus, it was, as Kevin kind of called it, the Zebu cattle. I mean, if you look like on Wikipedia, they say Brahmin, but it wasn't that simple. They used a lot of Nelore, Gir, and Gujarat cattle.
I,
And so
I
that's kind of how it goes.
I feel like there's still some colonialism
Mm-hmm.
in the breed names that are carrying over, like
Mm-hmm.
because stupid European white people couldn't pronounce the African word for the breed, so they just made something up or mistranslated it, and that got accepted into literature and into our culture. And I think we need to kind of maybe unlearn some of that.
Right. Yeah, and see, I'm not gonna lie. Whenever I said Gir, I listened to Kevin DeLue's podcast, and that's how he pronounced it. So I'm gonna kind of go with that because he would know better than I would.
I would agree. I would agree.
So, um, but yeah, that's kind of the general makeup of Beefmaster cattle. For the first time ever, I've been able to go to Laster's sale, look at their herd. It was back in September, and it was a really cool experience. They had their highest turnaround pregnancy rates in a while, and so I think they only had 20% not get bred back. They moved their cattle in March, give or take, from Matheson, Colorado, down to Falfurrias.
Okay.
So, and they moved
That's
because of the drought. That's why they moved them back down. And so they,
it's pretty serious change in environment and forage.
oh, it's yeah. I mean, some of the cattle were breathing pretty heavily because they couldn't handle such humidity at first, but uh surprisingly they were doing really well. But it was cool to see the foundation herd in the flesh for the first time. It was definitely one of my bucket list things.
Yeah, for that definitely would be cool. So I wrote a note down here. One of Tom Lassiter's it was 6 points, right?
6 essentials, yes, sir.
One of them was milking ability.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about that first for just a second.
Right.
And since the 50s, 60s have came and gone, and grain is cheap enough to feed the cows, and steel and diesel are cheap enough to build these massive, feeding facilities. I think that milking ability has gotten screwed up in the modern commercial type cattle that are, for that environment.
Right.
They one of the EPDs that's on a lot of bull catalogs is milk production.
Right.
And of course the Holstein guys, they want to focus on milk production. And I think there's a huge difference between a cow that's going to put out 100 pounds of milk a day versus a cow that's putting out 20 pounds of milk a day in the nutrient density of that milk.
Mm-hmm.
And like in my mind, we're talking about a breed that was developed back in the 20s and 30s and pretty much set.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the 20s and 30s, we didn't have the benefit of, sweet feeds, cake, distillers grains.
Right.
It was a lot lower energy feed back then. And it was lower energy budget through the entire year. So a cow that's going to exhibit excellent milking ability on a very energy limited diet like that, that tells me a couple things. That cow can lay down enough body fat. She's exceeded her nutritional requirements, that she's laying down significant fat deposits, because it needs to be said, an animal, a mammal, does not make milk directly from the food that it eats. It has to eat the food has to be stored as fat, and then the milk is made from the fat cells.
Right.
So we have to have those fat deposits before we can have good, high quality, rich milk. So, and this kind of goes like, I'm working my way through the Bondsma Lectures book.
Right.
If you're familiar with the book, it's a little dense.
I'm not, but I've wanted to figure out how I could get a hold of those. You know what I'm saying? Because I've heard about Bondsma a lot, and I've definitely wanted to understand his brain a little bit.
Okay, I'll tell you where I got my copy of the Bondsma lecture papers, and I'll try to remember to get back to milking ability. I actually got my copy from Steve Campbell.
Okay.
And that was down at Grass Fed Exchange. He had them down there for sale, and I bought a copy. If you're looking for a copy of that Bondsma book on Amazon or a bookseller, be ready for $300 to $500.
Okay.
Because it's so far out of print. I mean, everything is super rare. And, now in the last couple of years, since people have actually started hearing about the Bondsma lectures a lot, it's obviously in demand. So,
right.
They're out there. They're just difficult to get. And if you're really interested in trying to pick up a copy of those Bondsma lecture papers, I would suggest going to talk to Steve Campbell at tailormadecattle.com.
Okay.
And I'll try to put a link to that in the show notes.
Right.
But
yeah. So going back to milking ability, the thing that I found very interesting about Tom Lassiter's philosophy is he had a very regenerative mindset. And so I've never heard the term regenerative agriculture until I've listened to, TikTok, but as soon as that kind of light bulb went off in my head, and I'm like, that's exactly what Tom Lassiter was trying to preach whenever he constructed Beefmaster cattle. Because he was very emphasized on wanting to see how he can develop cattle that excel with nature, with what it provides, nothing else. And so, that's again, that's why I say the 6 essentials that he provided, I think that can be very applicable to not just Beefmaster cattle, but anyone that has cattle.
Sounds like he was really trying to promote breeding an animal that fits your environment.
Correct. Correct.
I-
And
It
to
seems
kind
like
of
go ahead.
understand that a little deeper, since we were talking about books, the Lassiter family, they have a book called The Lassiter Philosophy of Cattle Raising, and you can find that on Amazon, and you can find that on isacattlecompany.com, which is one of the Lassiter herds.
It'll be,
But
I'll find it. I'll make sure we get a link in the show notes.
right. Yeah. No, I think that book and that philosophy can only benefit anybody that have cattle. I mean, it doesn't just pertain to Beefmasters. So,
Right. I'm still hung up on milking ability.
mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that my friend Ed told me, my friend Ed Bricker was he was a mentor, a really good friend for several years. He had a ranch just up the river. I'd help him with management, fencing, burning type stuff, and he'd help me a lot with cattle.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's the one that got me started on Corrientes.
Okay.
And one of the things that Ed always told me about was he'd look for the cows that had a real small bag, but were
Right.
still raising a good calf.
Right.
And he always said that the milk that Corriente makes is way richer than a typical Angus cow is going to make. She's going to make a lot less, but it's going to be a whole lot richer.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of falls in with what we're talking about. Yeah, the cow's got to lay down fat, but she only needs to lay down just enough fat so she can live through the winter and make enough milk for her calf. That's all her body's going to want to do.
Right.
And through selective breeding, we find these smaller frame cattle that are forage efficient in the pasture, that have great milking ability. Those are the ones that definitely need to be kept because they're providing, that extra punch to their calves.
Right. I agree 100%. And so, one way that we are in the Beefmaster breed, and I'm sure with a lot of other seed stock breeds as well, one way that we're able to determine that is ratios. So if you can find an animal or if you can find a cow that consistently has calves that top their contemporary groups, that's the kind of cow that you need to have in your herd for sure.
Okay. Unpack that a little bit. Like what metrics are you using to measure that?
So the Beefmaster breed, they automatically calculate ratios. So when you have a contemporary group, although you have to have calves that are born within a 60-day window.
Okay.
And so and it has to be from the producer themselves. Like you can't buy a cow and have a calf at side and then bring it, and that calf will not be in that contemporary group. It has to be produced on your ranch. And so you have the mean ratio number is 100. That's the middle. Okay. And then so the calves that perform the average, they're going to be at or close to 100. The animals that outperform their contemporaries will ratio
are you
higher.
talking like strictly on a weight gain performance?
Weight and scan data and scrotal circumference with bulls. Any kind of weights and measures is where these contemporary groups are applied, or the ratios are applied. And so the better performing animals are, so it depends on how big the contemporary group is with the ratio window, but the bigger the contemporary group and the better the animal performs, the higher above 100 that ratio will score. Now the poorer performing animals will ratio under 100. So again, that mean average number is 100.
Okay.
And so the higher the performing animal goes, the higher above 100 it goes. And so obviously, and that ratio number will affect that animal's EPDs.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how that works.
Okay.
And so if you can find animal, and so also in addition to those ratios, in the system, it will show, okay, this animal ranked second out of 15 or first out of 15. So that kind of helps you understand where that animal scored in that contemporary group.
Okay. That makes some sense.
Right.
All right, where do we go now? How do you feel about EPDs? Do you think that EPDs are an accurate measurement, or do you think they're just kind of an okay guideline?
So I do utilize EPDs in my herd, but um, so the genetics that I use are from the cooperative that I'm involved with. Okay. And so I know a lot of people have skepticism on EPDs because they feel like, oh, people are lying about it. Well, you can pick apart, you can have a big assumption as to who those people are because the numbers seem incredibly unrealistic. But and especially if you're using your own genetics, the EPDs will fall into place as to where they should. You know, and again, it's not a tool, it's not, or it's a tool, it's not the messiah, it's not the end all beat all, it's a tool. Don't single trait select for it. Single trait or select for a balanced animal, because when you single trait select, you are going to sacrifice other important traits. Um, so again, just use it as a tool. But from my experience, EPDs have been pretty consistent with how the animal has performed. But with EPDs, you have EPD accuracies, which is what you have to look at also.
Okay.
And I DNA test my animals, and that helps with the accuracy as well, because you have genomic enhanced EPDs. And you know, again, you have to, if you're new to an association, you have to figure out what program to invest in initially. And then from that point, you either raise your own genetics or uh, keep yourself invested in that program to create consistency within your herd.
Yeah, and I think I see a lot of guys either I see a lot of guys just kind of not really what the hell am I trying to say here? It seems like a lot of folks just want to take an easy way out and have an easy
It
formula.
is, and I, especially in the registered business, I've seen a lot of people come in with a lot of money. They don't want to do anything. They don't even want to fix their own fence. They don't even want to manage their own cattle. They want to pay someone else to do it. Um,
They just want to
and
show up
and,
at the
and
meeting
th-
with the name on the shirt and the big black
right,
hat.
it's to them, it's about shaking hands and making money. But if they don't do it properly, they're not going to make money. They're going to lose money, and those are the kind of people that you'll see gone within 5 to 10 years. Um, but you know, I feel like in the cattle business in general, you have to earn your stripes. You have to sit back. You have to learn. You have to be mentored by someone initially. It's not, the cattle business is not a get rich quick scheme, and too many people think it is, that try to come into it.
And it's incredibly unforgiving to slow learners.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I mean, and I think that the main factor is when someone tries to get into the cattle business, you have to love it and you have to have a passion for it, because if you don't, you won't last. I
I
mean,
agree. And I think that there's different avenues that passion can take.
mm-hmm,
You know, some people have a passion for a breed. Some people just have passion for cows.
mm-hmm,
Some people have a passion to be on horseback all day and out in the sunshine.
right,
And some people have passion to want to go out and just walk around the grass all day.
right,
It's finding the combinations of your passions that can make your livestock operation and your lifestyle work.
mm-hmm, all right. I agree 100% on that.
Um, you made a comment earlier that I'd like to circle back to while we're still, reasonably close to the subject of breeds and breeding, about breeding for looks versus performance.
I believe they can go hand in hand because visual appraisal can it can depend on how the animal performs. If you have you have to animal that's easy fleshing. If that animal's not easy fleshing, they're going to fall apart, and so you have to look for that. It's not something that can be, I don't know, it's not a numerical value. It's a visual appraisal. And again, you have to look for an animal that has good feet and legs. You know, you have to animal that's structurally sound, you know, good top, good hip on them, lots of muscle behind them. They have to be wide from behind when you look at them. You know, and your cows need to look like cows and your bulls need to look like bulls. Otherwise there's going to be a hormone imbalance.
Yeah, I agree. Like no other place do we want things to all look the same. You know, a square box, the boys to look like girls, the girls to look like boys, other than in the show ring with with some types of cattle. And I think, you know, I go back to, you know, what Bondsma says, what Steve Campbell translates, and what he says. You know, the bull needs to look like it's walking uphill on level ground.
Right.
You know, big neck, big shoulders, good guts, you know, medium waist, decent butt. Your cows, you want your, you know, decent neck, small shoulders, big guts, big butt, good udder, and you want her to look like she's walking downhill on level ground.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, a lot of your power and you get from the bull, and a lot of your kind of more eye appealing feminine traits you get from the cow, and that's, you know, that kind of creates a balance when you cross those two together.
When you say that bull's got a lot of power, what do you mean?
A lot of muscle, mainly a lot of muscle, just a lot of natural thickness. You know, wide spring of rib. You know, and I don't know how to explain it better, but I mean, muscle goes a long ways with power.
You want to see something that just looks like it's jacked, just
Yeah,
muscle on
but
top of muscle, or
yeah, you don't want to go overboard with it, because when you have an animal that's too extreme in one direction, it's going to sacrifice other traits. So if you look at a bodybuilder, he has a hard time walking around. And
yeah,
so if
a lot of them don't know how to stretch.
right, well, so if you have an animal that has too much muscle, they're going to be short strided. They're not going to walk like an athlete. Okay. And the best way you want to put it is you want a cow to walk like an athlete. It's got to have flexibility to it, because it's not going to be easy for them when they're walking on long terrains, you know, big pastures.
Yeah, you can see my stuff's not
Right.
exactly flat. You know, I've got to
Yeah.
have some athletic cattle that can travel hills and you know that are pretty mobile.
Right.
So we're still trying to talk about beef masters here. So Tom Lasser came up, you know, with the breed philosophy, and you know, it does very much sound like what we're calling regenerative agriculture now. And you know, just doing some more thinking about that, the time frame that he developed it, all these modern inputs weren't available.
They were not, no.
And I think we're entering an era where the modern inputs are going to become. I think they'll still be available. I just think they're just going to keep going up and up and up in price rapidly. You know, faster than we can increase our revenue to buy them.
Sure.
And I think that I really feel that, you know, we need to be moving back towards what the beef masters are with every breed of cattle. You know, something that's, you know, we need to be looking at these animals that are going to do better on the resources we have,
right,
that are going to raise a good calf, that we're not going to have to use a lot of inputs in. So
I agree.
That being said, what are some of the better beef master crosses you've ever come across? And what are some that don't work, if you've ever seen any?
You talking about like Beefmaster cross with other breeds or crossbreeds?
Yeah, Beefmaster with Brangus, or Beefmaster with, you know,
Um,
Santal, or
I
whatever.
think it all depends on your region, but based on what I've seen, beef masters with Angus do really well. Because I mean, Angus obviously are in such high demand throughout the commercial industry. Um, beef masters cross with Charolais because they really put the pounds on. They really put the pounds on. They do well. A lot of sale barns are familiar with Charolais because of that yellow color. And Angus and Charolais do really well. Um, I really like red Angus. Especially like if you're in more south regions where it's hotter, I think those do well because a lot of black cattle are underneath those trees while the more lighter colored cattle are out working.
Do your
Um,
beef masters stay out working all day in the Texas heat, or they go shade up?
all day. They work all day. Now, I mean, occasionally you'll see them underneath the tree, but that's with any animal. Um, but they're out working when a lot of cattle are resting underneath the tree. That's for sure.
Or standing in the creek, or
Hmm.
standing in the tank?
Yeah. So I have a Jersey nurse cow, um, and she will be almost head deep into that pond while my other beef master cows are out working, or she'll be underneath the tree. She looks like she'll have her tongue sticking out, panting like she's about to die.
And the beef masters are just up there in the top of the
Yeah.
hill and in the hot
Right.
wind and blazing sun, just having a good old time.
Right.
I I would definitely back that up. The last 2 years, I've commingled my Corrientes with some Angus and some
Hmm.
Herefords, and that type cross.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting that the first warm days we get coming into, after they show up, coming in, late May and June, my Corrientes, they stay out hustling and work all day. And those black cows,
Yeah,
they head for the water, they head for the shade.
man. I think that Corriente cattle, especially, are kind of underappreciated price wise. I think that they create a good solid foundation maternally. Of course, they don't do the best on across the scale, but I think they're a great
Man, I'll send you a
breed.
picture of some ribeyes, some ones we just got back from the plant.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's one of those things where you kind of have to bypass a sale barn and feedlot with those.
100%.
Hmm. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of getting to that point to where like my bull calves that won't make the cut. I'm wanting to figure out a way to start up a producer to consumer type business on the side. Nothing. I'm gonna probably start really small, a couple calves here and there to kind of get a feel for it. But um, I want to bypass the feedlot and packers and sale barns.
Very cool. Even if it's just not even not even 4 or 5 animals a year,
Hmm.
that can still be a very significant bump on a ranch's bottom line, just direct marketing, even five
Yeah,
head.
yeah, yeah. I've let's see. I've heard of people that had s- that had some steer calves. I mean, they gross somewhere close to $4,000 off of a steer, which is incredible compared to, 600 to 800 bucks across the scale at the sale barn.
Uh, I don't have a copy in front of me, but just for grins, and I'll try to remember to put a link in the show notes to the USDA grass-fed beef report. They
Hmm.
only put it out about once a month. And the last one I saw was I printed at the end of August, I think, and it came out the beginning of August.
Right.
The court, if you believe the USDA numbers, and there's guys selling pasture finished grass fed halves for
Hmm.
$6 on the rail, $6 a pound on the rail.
That sounds about right. Like a
Um, Grass fed ground beef national average, I think, was $8.50 a pound on that
that's
report.
that's good.
Ribeyes, 40 a pound. Sirloins were 35 a pound.
Wow. That's approaching American Wagyu prices.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in the right market, yeah, $40 a pound for ribeye, sign me up for that.
Right.
You
Oh,
know,
all day, all day.
sign me up. But the market, it's there. I think the
Mm,
market is there. The price is there to support what we're doing. I mean, for the economics in October of 22, I mean, November might be completely different.
mhm.
Um, but currently, I think the economics make a really, really strong case to grass finish animals.
Right. Right. And I think that price elevation, a lot of that goes into trust because people trust what the producers are doing. They can, a producer can take a picture of an animal saying, "This is what you're getting."
Yeah,
You can't say the same thing for commercial beef at the store.
yeah, 100%. And that's something I've been talking about for a long time.
Mhm,
Is transparent traceability in the food system and the food supply.
mhm.
And there was there's a guy on TikTok, Wyoming rancher. His name is Drew Pearson.
Okay.
Shit, I hope I said that right.
It's probably Pearson. I
Yeah,
would say,
one of them is probably wrong, and I'll get some
right.
hate mail, whatever. Anyway, Drew's a really cool guy. We had him on, gosh, I want to say it was back like episode 15 or 17 or something.
Oh, okay.
And he's got a really cool program called Beef Chain. And uh, basically, you take your EID numbers,
Right.
you send them to them, and they start tracking them on the blockchain. And like eventually, the goal would be that when my calves are born or the first time they're worked and to get entered into my system, those numbers go off and they get tracked on beef chain.
Mhm,
And pretty much nothing would happen again until I processed it. And then when I
mhm.
process it or have that animal processed, then a QR code goes on each one of those packages.
Okay.
And that QR code traces back to that blockchain record.
Mhm.
And the way beef chain is set up, I would have control over who gets to see what parts of that data.
That's interesting.
So if I put in that data record, birth date, weigh date, when we worked them, when we put the tags in, when we did the vaccines, when we cut, and weights at different dates, all that gets attached to that animal's permanent record on the blockchain, and it can't be changed. And if it does get changed, there's a record of the change, and who changed it has to sign, that was changed.
Wow.
And then that data, as long as there's a chain of custody that keeps that meat tied to that record, that can go all the way to the end consumer. So they've
Mhm,
actually done this um, with some beef that they shipped over to, I believe, Taiwan and Japan.
mhm.
That when they serve the meat at a restaurant, they bring out a card with a QR code on it, and the consumer can scan that QR code and look at every day, all the data they want about that animal, where it was from, how it was raised, when it was born, when it was slaughtered, what it weighed, and if it had any medications.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So I think that's a direction, you know, I, I guess we can have a conversation about, EIDs and mandatory tracing and traceability. Now,
Right.
we're sitting here talking about EIDs and tracking shit on blockchain. Okay.
Mhm.
That's one thing. The government telling me you have to put EIDs on your cows and you have to give us the numbers. Now we've got a problem.
Right. I'm
Like,
I'm not a fan of someone telling me what I can and can't do with my cattle.
or just telling us you have to put these buttons in all your cows. You don't have to give us the numbers,
Mhm.
but you have to have this identification on your animals.
Right.
I'm not even sure I like that either. But the fact is, there's a lot of technology that exists that can
Mhm.
benefit us in a lot of different ways if we choose to use it. But
Mhm.
you know, there's always risks that come with technology.
I agree.
So, um, I got to pay a bill real quick, so we'll be right back in about 60 seconds.
Alrighty.
Introducing C90 Ocean Minerals. C90 offers complete nutrient support for today's farm and ranch. With over 90 minerals and trace elements in nature's perfect balance, C90 remineralizes soil, increases pasture quality, and elevates the wellness of your herd. Enjoy improved drought resistance, increased pasture protein and RFV values, and the elimination of pink eye and foot and hoof rot. Originally discovered by Dr. Maynard Murray, C90 is the only product that meets his standards for sea energy agriculture, including a living ocean source and elevated amounts of macro and trace elements. Freshly created in the Sea of Cortez and OMRI certified, C90 is free from pollutants and contaminants, including microplastics. Visit C90.com to learn more today. That's SEA-90.com. C90 is available through distributors across the U.S., including over 200 Tractor Supply locations. Click the link in the show notes to find the dealer nearest you. We are always looking to grow our network. Give us a call or email today, and be sure to mention that Ranching Reboot sent you. Please check the show notes for all the contact information. Now back to this week's episode. And we're back. So we're talking earlier, the beef masters were probably maybe originally one of the first breeds developed along some of the regenerative agriculture principles. So, and obviously it really seems like we got away from that as an industry, as the whole of the industry, we really got away from that, as we kind of got into the 50s and 60s. So what changes have you made recently to move back to a more regenerative type of ranching?
Well, I'm still in the process of trying to make those changes, but I definitely need to kind of restructure my, like, I need to develop more cross fencing to do rotational grazing. I'm not at that point yet, but that's definitely one of the changes that I'm wanting to make. Like we've the past couple of years we've done weed killing, but that's not regenerative. So what I'm trying to figure out is how you can get a better control of certain undesirable weeds within that pasture. So
what's an undesirable weed?
Well, like, cause we got broomweed, like that's choking out some of my grass. And so I don't know how to kind of get a handle on that, because I mean, and so I have a regenerative friend that lives down the road from me. And cause I'd ask him that same thing. He said that, spraying salt water along those pastures, spraying liquid molasses, and so that would kind of create more of a palatability standpoint to eat some of those undesirable things. But I also have weeds that have a lot of stickerburrs and cockleburrs, which
Yeah,
I
cows don't like to eat that stuff.
Right. And so how do I get a handle on that? You know what I'm saying? And so that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out, how I can get a better handle on that.
Part of me kind of wants to say that, things like, the stickers and the cuckleburrs and the broomweeds are a sign of poor health. Now,
Right.
don't take that as an attack.
No, I mean, I'm
It's
not.
It's just the way it is. But that also means that the only way you go, like, the direction is up.
Yeah.
And I still have cockleburrs, I still have stickers in the pasture. There's places that are undesirable.
Right.
And you can choose to look at it as a problem.
Yeah.
Or you can choose to not look at it.
Yeah. I mean,
one of the old cowboys that worked for my dad back in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a washout by a fence or some erosion or something. And one day Dad was getting really upset about it and getting kind of keyed up, and he was wanting to fix it, wanting to know what to do. And, just had like a 65 horsepower Massey Ferguson tractor with a front end loader on it. Like, you're not going to go do a bunch of dirt work with that thing. Like, that's not the right tool for the job.
right.
And he couldn't figure out how to fix it. And, he kept talking about. And eventually Ivan just said, well, if it bothers you so damn much, why do you keep going over there and looking at it?
Yeah. Fair point, but sometimes that's easier said than done, though.
Yes. Yes. Very much so.
But going back to our practices, we've always in the winter we've always drilled oats. Well, I say drilled. And initially we would disc it and then drill it. Um and then that we didn't like messing with the grain drill that much, so we would disc it, spread it, and then disc over it again to kind of cover it.
Okay.
But so I made a comment the other day on TikTok where I said some of the things that we're doing is costing us money, and that's one of those things. I do believe that uh putting down oats is a good thing because it cuts back on feed or feeding hay.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so I think in the method I think that would work, that would kind of be regenerative related, is to just no-till drill it. And I have a buddy that does it, and he does really well with it. So I think that would be a regenerative approach to what I've been doing. Um, and so that's kind of what I have in mind at the moment. But I'm completely new to the whole regenerative philosophy, and so I'm definitely wanting to learn more about it for sure.
Well, like we talked earlier about, your forage on most of your ranches is good in the
Mhm.
fall and in the spring.
Right.
So now hear me out. If we, turn back the clock 1700, 1800, whatever, when there's still plenty of buffalo roaming around.
Right.
So what if, like in the fall and the wintertime, they were down around your part of the world
Right.
because you got good forage? Like the grass
Mhm.
has, there's good punch, there's good green grass.
Yeah.
And then as you go through the fall and the winter and you start rolling into spring, they start running out of grass down south and they just chase the green up all the way north through the plains, end up in Canada in the summer.
Mhm.
And when it starts running out of grass and gets cold in Canada, the whole buffalo herd goes back to Texas and eats
Right.
everything back and forth along the whole way.
Right.
And that would really make sense, like for my forage availability and like my forage, when I have forage and when I have protein in the grass.
Right.
So like my grass is going to start coming in. Like I can have cool seasons in March if I've got rain and temperature. Most often, I won't get much until probably mid-April, mid to late
Mhm.
April. By the time the soil temperature gets up enough and I've had some moisture, that's
Mhm.
when my cool season wakes up. 3 to 4 weeks later, the warm season wakes up. A couple weeks after that, it's when the cool season quits. So I've got great protein and forage availability from. Oh, that was my phone. I've got great protein and forage availability from about May 1st to about end of July.
Mhm.
Sometimes early July, sometimes late July, and sometimes that can even stretch all the way down into September. Just kind of depends on the year we've had.
Right.
But then there's a point where we get to the heat of the summer. My warm season grasses shut off. They go into root reserve and stem and seed head, and they shut off, and we just fall off this cliff of nutrition. Like the protein just kind of disappears suddenly.
Mhm.
That happened like 2 months ago
Right.
because it's so friggin' dry. And now we just kind of coast on stockpile. But then in a year where we'd get rain,
Mhm.
I would have a protein bump in November, December that would last till about mid-January,
Mhm.
maybe beginning of January when it gets really cold and the weather starts coming in. Um, I was kind of counting on that that late fall protein bump last year.
Yeah.
I didn't get it.
Well, because of the lack of rain.
Yeah, I'm not getting it this year either.
Because like we put out oats and it didn't do. No, we put out ryegrass because we were bailing for our neighbors a lot, and that kind of interfered with our schedule and planting oats. So we just spread out ryegrass, and that didn't come on worth a crap. And so I blame it on the rain. But I mean, ryegrass by itself, I don't like planting because it's so stringy and small. Like it's not a broadleaf at all. Um,
Cattle do. I mean, it's a good grazing crop though.
right. Well, I mean, like, cause the way we do it is, we'd put oats and ryegrass. Like I wouldn't put ryegrass by itself. Um, so we would put oats and ryegrass together usually, but um, again, because we got caught up cutting hay, for our neighbors and stuff like that. That's kind of how it played out last year. But usually every year, especially when we get some rain, those oats improved a lot. They helped drastically in terms of feeding hay or not feeding hay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, kind of on this same line. So I've got, let's just call it right around 7,000 acres of native range
Okay.
on the ranch. There was, from what I can tell on Google satellite images,
Hmm.
like I can find about 560 to 580 acres that were farmed at one point. According to the FSA office, there is only 340.
Okay.
So somewhere between 350 and 600 odd acres of farm ground were ever that were all on this ranch, because that's pretty much all that was flat enough to be farmed.
Right.
And the question keeps coming up to me. Other people ask, my wife asks, and of course I ask myself, okay, so there is a couple hundred acres that are flat enough I could drag a tool across it with a tractor.
Hmm.
Dad planted that stuff back, the last of it back to grass in 1985.
Okay.
And it wasn't until probably 2004, 2005 that we were really successful getting the forbs and the tall grass reestablished in those
Hmm.
areas. And I get really hesitant to think about, you know, hooking up to a tractor and a big drill to go drag something into the dirt, go drag in cover crop seed at $20 an acre.
Hmm.
Man, that's an awful big gamble.
It is. It is
That's
a
an
gamble.
awful big gamble for a guy like me that's trying to operate on, without machinery like that. I don't own
Yeah.
that shit. I'd have to go rent that power. And it just seems like that's a lot of expense. But I can see where, you know, I could definitely see a use case scenario for it. Now,
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm saying that if I had farm ground that was still being farmed today,
Hmm.
like literally the guy across the fence who's they farm wheat, a lot of wheat around here, especially on the tops where my farm ground is.
Hmm.
And it's just as bad as you think it is.
Hmm.
A week after they cut the wheat, they're running the disc through it. It gets disc 2 or 3 times, maybe a
Hmm.
spray, then a field cultivator, and they're planting it right now. So it's
Right.
it's less worse than 6 month fallow corn, but it's still 2, 3, 4 month fallow field for wheat. Um, I don't. If I had a wheat field that was surrounded by pasture,
Hmm.
I'd be putting in some. I'd be trying to transition that to no till.
Right.
I'd be putting in native grasses. I mean, I get native grass seed is probably some of the most expensive shit you can buy on the planet. It's
Okay. And so it's like when you say native grass seed, is that like to that region or just like what would
to
go
that
into that
region.
native seed?
I
Okay.
For me, I mean, there'd be some cool seeds that I'd put in, but primarily I'd want to make sure I had some warm season, native warm season grasses, big blue stem, little blue stem,
Right.
switchgrass, Indian grass, and maybe even some side oats grama.
Uh-huh.
And I I didn't do my research, so I'm not really prepared to talk about grass seed blends, but um, I would look for a blend that's representative of what should be in your area. Now, that being said, 2% of the original native range is left,
Hmm.
up and down the Great Plains. And I feel very fortunate that I've got a chunk of that.
Hmm.
I've got the vast majority of this ranch has never been converted from grassland to anything
Hmm.
else. So there's 98% of it that's gone.
Right.
And, I'm going to assume that you're on, like, where you're at was completely farmed up, ripped up, and improved grasses were planted, or something non-native is there, and it's mostly a monoculture.
So the 46 acres, that we own, my dad planted coastal uh at some point, which I mean is still pretty much there. A lot of my area has a lot of Bermuda grasses. We haven't really touched our lease place with different grasses or anything like that. Except for the oats during the winter, but that's about it. Um, as far as the warm season grasses, I'm not sure what specifically, but I do know it's Bermuda grasses. And I'm not sure if I mean, I don't think that's native. I mean, because Bermuda grass isn't native to Texas, I don't think.
I don't think it is either.
Right.
But what I'm getting at is, no matter what your land base looks like now, or what few species of grass are on it or could be on it,
Right.
I think that that all of us in the plains, well, even in the mountains, or in the east, right? We need to be looking at transitioning back away from these quote improved pastures or improved grasses that require inputs, back
Uh,
to something that's more native that doesn't require inputs.
right.
But the trick is how do you get there? Like, you don't just take a farm field that has been growing wheat on a summer fallow rotation for the last 80 years. You're not just going to go drill in native range seed and something's going to come up next year.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you that ain't going to happen. Like that would be a pipe dream. So
Right.
maybe the thing we need to look at is like a pasture cropping transition, to where we take this pasture, and maybe the first year we do like we no-till in a soil health blend, like turnip radishes, things that'll fix nitrogen and others in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
Then we come in, and maybe there's some native seeds mixed in there, warm
Mm-hmm.
season, cool season grasses. Then the next time you come in, no-till in something else. No-till in like, an oats or a rye or a wheat, just something that's going to come up, just something
Mm-hmm.
that's going to grow some more living roots to provide forage for the cows,
Mm-hmm.
because it may take it, it may take a year, 2, 3, 4 to establish a seed bank, to where it
Mm-hmm.
will to where the seed bank can regenerate the plants, and the plants you see come up every year are coming from the seed bank, and they're what will grow that year based on available soil nutrients
Mm-hmm.
and available rainfall.
Right.
But what does that look like? That's
Yeah. I mean, I would like to know that for sure. I mean, um, I don't know. I want to do. I mean, the thing about regenerative agriculture that kind of fascinates me is obviously saving money in your pocket, um, and then also, uh, kind of helping the land. And I mean, at that point, vegans don't have an argument. You know,
ah, well, that's a can of worms.
it is. It is.
Okay, are the vegans right?
It depends on what it is.
Um, I guess when you look at when 30,000-foot view, their argument that animal agriculture is destroying the planet.
Uh, I mean, from my I mean, I don't know the exact number, but in terms of carbon footprint, methane gas isn't nearly as detrimental as carbon footprint from vehicles and things of that. So, I mean,
I would agree with that, and I guess I I wasn't necessarily trying to trap you into saying anything at all.
right? No, no, no. I know.
Uh, and I think a lot of the vegan arguments are extremely superficial.
Hmm.
And but then again, I think they also have some extremely strong arguments, because they're viewing life through a very narrow lens of what they see through their activists
Hmm.
and organizations like PETA, and very cherry picked media,
Hmm.
you know, and I'm sure there's some confirmation bias going on there. we're all guilty of it. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not guilty of suffering from confirmation bias every once in a while. And I guess there's a little bit of that, right here on our side, because,
Mhm.
we have a tendency to view the world from our own narrow lens.
Sure.
And, the way my paradigm is, like, vegans should not have any sort of a problem with anything I'm doing out here.
Right.
And right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm not doing business practices just to keep vegans happy. Like, let's be clear on that. I
Yeah.
do things the way I do them because I think it's the right way.
Right.
Now, when you have some of them saying that, conditions in hog houses are horrible, or, having to euthanize an entire barn of 10,000 hogs, and the way they did that was
Right.
horrible.
Right.
That shit is indefensible.
Right.
The 10,000 head of cattle that died in the Kansas feedlots back in the summer due to a heat bulge overnight, that shit is indefensible.
Mhm.
And that's why the vegans have an argument.
Right.
And that's why people are listening to the vegans, is because we collectively in the beef industry, in agriculture, we do shit that is indefensible.
Right.
And
But I do think that on our side, you know, while they try to make an argument, they don't. For example, the way Temple Grandin developed working systems for cattle, the way that she developed a system to process them. Um, you know, I they don't have an argument. I mean, because I did a TikTok video the other day of where PETA tried to make a video on an animal getting stunned, and it blew up. I ain't gonna lie. I mean, it got like what 1.4 million views.
I think it's kind of blown up in their faces,
It
honestly.
did. It did. I mean, like, because in that video, there's nothing wrong that I see. It's quick, humane,
Hey,
you know.
okay, well, and what's the alternative, PETA? Let them die
Right.
of old age in a pasture?
That's not only hurting themselves, but the environment as well. I mean,
That's not humane.
no, it's not.
The most humane way is a bolt gun, and we're talking
It's
about harvesting animals.
right. Right. I
You know,
agree
and,
100%.
and to that extent, I had dinner with some friends last night, and this was one of the topics that kept coming up in conversation, is ethical slaughter. How do we, how do we provide ethical slaughter to the most amount of people as possible? And we're talking about, granted, we were just kind of throwing a lot of ideas around. We're talking about mobile slaughter units again, and going around, and a group having one and contracting around, or having various fractional ownership interests where producers would have a fractional ownership interest in a mobile plant, and the mobile plant would come to your ranch, and you just lead the cow up, or call them into a little pen, and 1 second they're eating grass and pasture on the sun on their back, and the next they're on a one-way trip to freezer camp.
Right.
I I'd love to see us get a lot closer to that model, and
Mm-hmm.
lower stress on the animal, because we owe it to our animals
To
to
treat them
give
with
them,
respect.
absolutely, with
Yep.
ultimate respect, even up to and slightly past their final moments alive.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%.
I Call me a little weird, but when I drop them off at the plant, I say goodbye to each one of them, and I thank each one of them as they come off the trailer.
Mm-hmm. I do too. Like, cause we had off that Jersey nurse cow that I mentioned earlier, we had a Beefmaster Jersey cross steer, and I took him to the packer, and I it's it makes you think a little bit, and appreciate what they have to contribute to you.
It's a different trip than when you're just taking one to the barn,
Right.
and the guy that buys her at the barn's just going to send her right to the plant. I mean, it's a different trip when you take her yourself.
It is. It is.
I Something that people ought to experience a little more often, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But so, kind of continuing down this path, that is some of the practices that vegans get upset about, like hormones in the meat. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
I totally get that. I also totally get why backgrounders and feedlots will use hormones.
Right.
I mean, you take the nuts off your boys, there's no sex hormones in there.
Right.
They need to be replaced. Okay. But why are we pumping them full of estrogen? Why are we pumping them full of basically sex change hormones?
Why not just keep it there if that's what the case is, if that's what you're trying to get back?
Yeah. You know, why do we have to mix testosterone with estrogen to inject our castrated male cattle with? Why don't we just do testosterone? Okay, I get it. It's a meat quality thing because, like we were talking about earlier, the bulls need to look like boys and the cows need to look like girls. And what's the difference there? Okay, we want our boys to be big chiseled muscle. You don't want that chiseled muscle on the cow. You want nice, soft, rounded curves, right?
Right.
Testosterone puts up that hard, lean muscle. Estrogen puts up that fluffy, soft muscle.
Right.
So I get it. That's why that's why we're injecting steers with estrogen to get them to make that softer, fluffier muscle that's more rounded, more curved.
For tenderness.
But is it though?
Probably not, but I mean, I assume that's their goal.
Okay, tenderness. I catch all kinds of hell for my cattle. Oh, those old longhorns will taste like a boot. Whatever. Like we're eating one that's 5 years old that I jerked out of the pasture and hauled to the processor.
Yeah.
Is it tough? It's only slightly tougher than anything you'd buy at Walmart.
Right.
The taste is freaking amazing.
Right.
I can eat an 8-ounce piece of that and be way more full than eating a 24-ounce certified Angus from Walmart. Okay. Marbling, it wasn't a graded prime, but it's really good looking meat. It's super good looking meat. And I wouldn't say that it's tougher than old boot leather. In fact, I had one of the folks that I sold a half to, they had sirloins the other night. And they said once they got past the connective tissue on the outside and the fat, that it was so tender they could almost cut it with a fork.
Interesting.
Like, okay. Yeah, by the way, I just want you to know that was a 6-year-old Coriané that I pulled out of the pasture and hauled to the processor.
That's interesting.
So they're not all grass is created equal.
I agree with that.
And that's something that there is a quality issue, like with people doing grass-fed beef, because the forage that they ate for the last 60 days has so much of an effect on the flavor profile of that meat.
Yes.
And that's what it really comes down to is the diet that lasts, is 60 to 90 days. That's going to give a lot of the meat its flavor profile. And when I eat some of this that, out of ours that we processed, I can close my eyes and almost get a vision of the grasses and that, of the forbs and of the area that they've been in for the last couple of months. I can almost get that vision in my head just from the taste that are in my mouth.
Right.
And I don't think the folks that are going to Walmart buying that CAB, that prime CAB, get near that same experience.
Right. Because I mean, because a lot of those steers, they're pushed too hard, too quick, and tenderness and marbling. That's what takes time. And that's why like Wagyu cattle, that's why it takes so long for them to develop that marbling. That's why it takes 32 months, give or take.
Yeah.
For them to finish. Because like if you butcher a Wagyu animal as a yearling or 14 months old, it's not gonna have much better marbling than a Coriané.
Yep.
So it all depends on how they're developed, how long they're developed, and the way you do it, what you do it on, what you develop them on.
It's what you develop them on. I think is a lot of it.
Yeah.
I feel like I can take any of my calves at any age after weaning, and they could go to the yard and transition to corn and gain great.
Mm-hmm.
Would they finish like a straight up Angus at the
Right.
same weight? Hell no. I'm going to be a lot lighter. I'm going to be probably 20%, 15 to 20% lighter at finish weight.
Yeah.
But it'll still finish. It'll still pack on pounds, and it'll still pack on marbling and condition. And like my old mentor, Ed, now granted, this is all anecdotal and third hand, whatever.
Right.
He told me that he had some Corriente Charolais cross calves, and he had a whole lot load of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept ownership of them all the way through the yard, all the way to the plant. How many of pot load of Corriente Charolais cross calves you think graded into the CAB system? He said he had he said he had 40% of those calves that didn't have a drop of Angus blood in them. None of them were black.
It's at 50. Oh, really?
He pulled CAB premium on them.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think almost 20% of them graded prime.
And another thing that goes into it that I don't think people really grasp a handle on is genetics. Genetics play a huge factor into it, because in the Beefmaster business, you'll have animals that are, because like we scan our cattle, I think the deadline window is 500 days, either 500 or 550 days. No, I think it's 500 days. But anyway, so so they get scanned, and I mean you can tell which genetics consistently marble well and which ones don't. And like especially you go like, because there's a bull developed by Lorenzo Lassiter called El Bar en Fuego. He is one of the better marbling bulls, and a lot of those calves are developed on straight grass. And so like you can look at that rib fat and then look at that marbling and tell which one are the true marblers. For example, if you have an animal that marbles at a 4.5, which is choice. Okay. And then they have under 1/10 of an inch of rib fat, that's going to be one of your good marblers. But then you have an animal that has, I don't know, a 2.5 IMF, but then has a 0.25 rib fat. That's not going to marble that well. And so like in part of when I select cattle and I'm looking for that marbling content, that's what I look for, is I kind of compare the marbling to the rib fat.
Okay.
And so that's,
so are you looking for a ratio between rib fat and the marble score?
So each certain characteristic have their own ratio. But yeah, I mean, I mean, I'd say, I mean, in an ideal world, I like to have an IMF score of at least 4, because that's choice. But I'll accept in the 3s because that's high select. And so
if you can do high select or choice on forage only, switching to grain in a feedlot will bump that up significantly.
Yeah. And then and of course, the USDA considers finished at 0.45. So if they can have, but like you can also tell if an animal's been fed grain or not based on how big that rib and rump fat is too. So like if they're at close to finished, they've been developed. But if they are under, I would say, I mean, if they're like close to 1/10 of an inch of rib fat or less, that's straight grass, easy. So I mean, again, when you can find an animal that marbles high with a minimal amount of rib fat, that's your outlier right there.
And that's the one you want to keep.
Correct.
Okay. So let's take away all the technology tools.
Okay.
What's your visual indicator for that?
Fleshing ability.
Okay. What are you looking at specifically?
If an animal can keep their condition in a rough environment, that's a lot of it. but it's not just that, but like in terms of carcass merit, but an animal that has that is easy fleshing ability correlates to fertility as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, visually, if you can find an animal that is has a good fleshing ability, those are the ones you need to keep as well.
I guess what like, are you looking at anything specifically in the ribeye or rump area versus ribs?
So I don't know how to explain it, but like you can tell if an animal is going to have a lot of ribeye area if you look at them from behind or just look at their top lines are going to be significantly wider. Sometimes you have those animals that have, like if you look at a loaf of bread, it kind of has that groove and then dips in the middle. That's going to be a big ribeyed animal. Um, so basically width of top is going to emphasize ribeye area, and then just muscle expression itself.
Okay. Okay. So let's tell me tell me about what's your job description for a cow? What makes a successful cow for Jon Tipton?
Well, cows are a factory. They need to work. Um, they can't be pampered. They need to get bred around 13 to 15 months of age starting. They need to have that calf at around 2 years old. Um, they need to have a good udder, real tight bag, small teats to where that calf can fit in its mouth without me having to help it. Um, and then she needs to get bred back when that calf is that side. And she needs to continue doing that throughout her life.
Do you pull calves?
Not really. I mean, I have, but not in a while. Um, the last time I did it, I th- I think, I mean, you can also like because the calf was born late, and it was a heifer that was born over 100 pounds, which isn't normal. But
No.
and it was off of a heifer too, so it was a first calf heifer. Um,
Did you keep her
but
or did you get rid of her?
she died. She had an aneurysm.
Oh, that's not ideal.
No, so
But I guess that still answers the question.
yeah, I mean,
Okay, would you have kept her?
uh, it would depend on the circumstances. I mean, it would depend on the due date of that calf. If it was born late, um, is it that cow's fault? But at the same time, when I select for animals, I look at their adjusted birth weights. I look at their birth weight ratios, and I look at that birth weight EPD. And I mean, on heifers especially, I use a bull that I know will be a calving ease bull.
Okay.
And so, for the most part, I haven't been wrong when selecting on what I mean. It's heifers especially that you gotta make sure that they're with a bull that isn't going to throw 90-pound calves.
I mean, I can definitely see that. I can
Yeah.
definitely see that.
So, but also when it comes to birth weights, it's not all on the cow; it's on the bull too. So you can't call a cow for something that's 50% responsible on the bull.
Okay. I mean, I can see your point. Like,
Yeah.
I like to say that I'm a little more strict than that. If a cow
Mhm.
doesn't bring in a live calf,
Well, no, I mean, if a
then
cow doesn't bring in a live calf, I mean, and
if
again,
she doesn't bring in a live calf or she has to be assisted,
yeah,
she just go down the road.
right.
And
No, I
and
mean, I agree with that though.
whatever reason she didn't bring in a calf, even if she had a live calf and it got eaten
Mhm.
by coyotes or the calf got sick and died,
Well,
I'm still going to blame the cow.
if you read that book that Tom Lasseter wrote or Lori Lasseter wrote, Lasser's philosophy of cattle raising. Um, Whenever you keep a cow that has lost a calf, that cow is going to have an advantage over all the other cows that have had calves. Um, and so,
Explain that to me like I'm 5. Because to me, like we talked about with the job description of a cow, she's got to bring in a calf. I mean, that's her
yeah,
whole entire job. And if she rolls a donut one year, like that's got to be a balance between what is her genetic value to my herd of future progeny, and can I afford to feed her for another year in
mhm,
order to try to get another calf out of her?
right,
And I get what you're saying, but I think a lot of guys get in a trap like, oh, we'll breed her back next year. She'll get back next year. And they'll put $200 or $300 a cost in the cow over the winter to keep her around instead of
mhm,
turning her into $1,000 bill. They'll put $300 a cost in her, try to breed her again next year, and she rolls a donut the second year.
mhm.
You
Well,
know,
yeah, no, I mean, I mean, we've never really had calving issues, so that answer was, that question was kind of, you know, different because I mean, it's just we haven't really run into that issue much, but um, so again, when the cow has the advantage because it has a lot longer time to recuperate compared to the other cows that do have calves. So she has an advantage of recuperating compared to those other cows.
but then if we keep her in our herd because she had, let's say, an unfair advantage of an unproductive year to
Yeah.
gain back that body condition, I kind of almost feel like that's not doing us favors down the line, because then we have genetics that need to skip a year to get back to fertility.
Right. No, I agree.
You know? But you got to do what works for you and your environment. I mean,
Mhm.
everybody has a total. Everybody's got a totally different situation, and
Mhm.
that's the bottom line.
Right.
What works for me won't work for my neighbors across the fence.
Right. And so, um, and another thing that came out of that philosophy book is a cow should provide a dividend every year, whether it's that calf or her.
Yes, yes, and sometimes the dividend is at
Is
freezer
her.
camp.
That's true. That's true.
Ah, so how do things look for you the rest of the winter? Do you have enough forage to get through back to green grass, or are you still working on that?
Let's see. We got an inch of rain at both places not too long ago, but I don't think that's near enough for what we need. I think we need about a good 10 inches, to fill up our tanks. Um, but as far as forage goes, it's as of right now, it's not looking good. Because from all that summer drought, but so I definitely don't have any stockpiled grass whatsoever. But like I said, we bought about 120 bales of improved jigs grass, so that's helping us so far whenever, we need to feed cows. You know, but
Yeah, I get that. Like, unless you saw the drought coming in the spring,
yeah,
there's no way to prepare for it unless you saw
one
it coming in the spring.
well, the thing is I'm kind of based on how the winter goes is how the rest of the year is gonna go. And so like the last winter, it didn't rain that much. So I didn't really think anything of it, but looking back on it, that's probably a big indication we're gonna have a bad drought.
Generally, yeah. My benchmark is less than 4 inches of rain between November 1 and April 1
Okay.
indicates drought. And we keep in mind that's based on my 22 inches ish of rainfall a year, and the let's call it the statistical average distribution of rainfall throughout the year for the last 130 years. Like,
Mhm.
if I don't get 4 inches in the dormant season, I better be planning for drought. It better be dry. Last year we had like 2.5.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking in going into April, I'm going through March. I know where I'm already sitting for rain. I can look at the National Drought Monitor. I can look at the Drought Mitigation Center. I can look at the Climate Prediction Center. And back in March, they were all saying the same thing. Like, it's going to be dry for the next 3 months. Like, okay, I've got a drought indicator. CPC says drought for 3 months. That's where I'm going. That's where I'm planning.
Right.
And that's the direction I went. And it seems like the people that are really struggling through this drought are the people that have never been through one.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, how, South Texas, it's been prone to, or at least in the Hallettsville area, it can, you know, drought, smaller droughts have been common, like to the point of where the grasses become dead, but never to the point of where I just have no grass, to where the grass just doesn't grow at all, you know. And it was scary. I've never seen it this bad in my life.
Um, so the last bad drought we had here, 10, 11, 12,
Mhm.
it was not near this bad.
Yeah.
And some of the old timers that have since gone extinct and departed us on this earth,
Mhm.
they I remember several of them saying that the drought that we had back there 10, 11, 12 was worse than the bad one they had in the mid 50s around here.
Hmm.
Now, and I was thinking about this last night when we were coming back from town. I feel like I kind of have a half-ass accurate picture of the history of the plains as far as major events. Europeans when they were where, and when Native Americans were where, and who did what, and how things may have looked. Like, I feel like I kind of have a general idea of that, but then, like, I get into more specific things about how things were here and how things have been here for the last 150 years. And doing this podcast, talking to folks like you, and a lot of other people I've talked to, um I think there's a lot of history that we don't understand about our area, and about what went on and what was there,
Mhm.
the last 150 years, and how the area used to look.
Right.
And not saying that that's where we're going back to, but I guess what I'm saying is, that, shit, I guess I don't know what I'm saying. Lost train of thought again. That'll happen. um so yeah, planning for winter. I'm um i'm still struggling to get the supplement hay that I need.
Okay.
And I'm gonna own that one. I should have been more proactive in making that happen instead of relying on somebody else to get it for me. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of why me and my dad have tried to bale our own hay. A lot of the hay that we do bale though comes from our neighbors. So like we'll, bale hay for them and then split the hay 50-50.
yeah,
So
yeah, and that totally makes sense. And like we were talking earlier, I've got this old farm ground.
mhm.
Man, it sure would be nice to have my own hay field or have my own alfalfa field. That's just there that I hire somebody to come in and plant.
Mm.
I hire somebody to come in and bale. Well,
Yeah.
then you get into custom hire expense. Oh, and then we're farming now, and then well, while
Mhm.
we're doing that, let's maybe plant some cover crops so we could strip graze. There's
Yeah.
there's a lot of possibilities. Like, so I thought about just trying to come up with various schemes to get my cows through the winter on as little as possible, with as little effort and labor and
Yeah.
diesel fuel as possible. And part of me still kind of thinks that maybe plant some cool season covers
Yeah.
is not the dumbest thing in the world that I could do.
Right. I mean, it's helped us, like, cause if I remember whenever we only put out hay, I mean, every other day we'd be putting out 2 bales per place kind of thing. And then whenever we started planting oats, I mean, I have about what 30 mama cows, and we've had that for a while. But there was some times where we only put out 20 bales that winter.
Ouch.
Well, I mean, because of those oats. I mean, we didn't,
Yeah.
we did,
Oh, you didn't
we,
need to put up that because you had the oats.
yeah,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
right. Yeah, yeah. We didn't, we didn't, our hay feeding depleted tremendously once we put out those winter grasses. So, and I mean, again, I'm trying to figure out a more cost effective way to put that out in that, and my guess is to no till it.
Yeah. Oh, there's some other strategies. If you're gonna one strategy I've seen, I think my friend Katie talked about it, about doing like a swath grazing type scenario where they do
Mhm.
go in with a swather and lay everything down and put it in a swath. And
Interesting.
maybe they might bale a little bit of it just so they know like how many feet down that swath is X number of pounds.
Right.
So then they just fence off a portion of that swath and like make blocks.
Mhm.
So if you need, if your cows are going to need 2,000 pounds of forage for the day, you just go out and you measure off what about 2,000 pounds is in that swath and add a little bit for poor measurement and fudge factor
Right.
and roll with that. And then, you know, there's still a diesel fuel pass of the swather,
Mhm.
but compared to the fuel for baling and the time for baling, it's a lot less.
It is.
And you can replace that baler and the tractor and then the loader tractor and the bale trailer with a guy on a four-wheeler with a reel of poly wire.
Right.
So there's also that. Um, I got to get out of here in a little bit. Let's talk about hay war and then we can go.
Oh man, I didn't pay too much attention to it, but it was entertaining for sure.
Yeah, so it hasn't come out yet, but previous episode I've done that everybody should have already listened to by that, and this comes out with Caitlin from Noble Research.
Okay.
The You're Wrong.
Mhm.
Uh, she she kind of got a little salty with me. She's like, "Yeah, you started all that, then you just ghosted everybody on the app and left us to fight your battles for you." Like, sorry, when I get a video that's get 500,000 views, I gotta log out and not read comments for a while because that shit is not good for my mental health.
Right. Man, I tell you what, that app can get stressful for sure.
Yeah, there's
On
something. I,
it's
I think,
it's a different level of toxic for sure.
but it's also a different level of connection.
It is. Yeah, I mean, there's things on that app that I've learned, like, cause I mean, I have an animal science degree. There's things on that app that I've learned that I didn't learn in college. Um, there was a lot of things that I did learn in college that were extremely useful that I still use today. Like AI. I learned how to AI in college, and I AI my own cattle. But I mean, again, it's a different kind of informative.
Right. And it's a different kind of engagement than pretty much any other platform too.
It is. It is.
And you hit a different audience. There's always all kinds of weird stuff coming up on my For You feeds. I'm like, why is this here?
Well,
But
like, you got pet raccoons, pet tigers. I'm like, what in the hell is this?
yeah, and then the next one is somebody dancing, and then the next one is somebody yelling about the price of hay. I mean, it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of wild. But and maybe this is echo chamber effect.
Mm.
I see more conventional guys starting to ask questions and moving towards the more regenerative practices than I see guys doing regenerative stuff going the other way.
I would agree with that because I mean, I'm probably an example of that because all I've known is conventional stuff, but um, I'm again, my main thing that I'm wanting to accomplish is cut the costs that I have been paying for. And then being able to improve the environment for the longevity of my family down the line.
Right.
So, and I want my great grandkids to still be raising beefmaster cattle. I doubt that would probably happen, but that's the goal. And so if I can be able to make that happen in any way I can, that's what I'm going to try to do.
I like it. I was sitting here thinking, listening to you talk, thinking back to, oh, we were talking about vegans earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once people kind of start coming over to regenerative agriculture and learning about the soil and ecosystem function, we start asking questions
Right.
about conventional practices, and a lot of those conventional practices that are accepted
Mm-hmm.
are indefensible from an animal welfare point of view or a human health point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And social media is helping shine a light in some of those dark corners and asking some of those questions that that some of the big players in the industry would rather not have asked or rather not have said out loud. See, vegans, back to vegans again. I forget. I need to take better notes. I forgot what the hell I was going to say again. We've got to be a little more transparent. We got to be a little bit more open about what we're doing, and better about meeting people where they are, not just
Right.
other producers, but some of these vegans.
Right.
And I think it bears to be said that, they just have a strange idea of what sort of animal suffering is acceptable. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you want everybody to eat plant-based diet. Great. Let's farm up the whole damn world and let's plant everything, to soy and kale.
Right.
But here's the problem. When we rip up those fields, we destroy all the life in those fields. When we spray our insecticides on them, we kill all the insects, which in turn is less food for birds, which in turn is less food for other birds and other predators. So it's like if we follow the path that the vegans want us to follow and Bill Gates wants us to follow, eating fucking fake meat and plants all the time, we're going to be on a brown ball of dust.
Yeah.
Like WALL-E, the movie WALL-E is our future.
Right.
If we go down that path.
And then their whole ideology is just going to go down the crap hole because they can't grow nothing.
Exactly. Like, oh, we'll just invent our way out. We'll just invent new fertilizers. We'll just invent better pesticides. We'll just invent better insecticides. No, I don't think that works anymore. I think we're at the point where Mother Nature has said, enough with the bullshit.
Right.
And I think it could be scary in the future with, food availability. There's that I've been seeing it on our favorite app and on Facebook the last couple of days. And by the time this comes out, it may be a reality that there just might not be winter vegetables.
Yeah.
Because of the drought and lack of irrigation water and too high of temperatures, where in Southwest Arizona, where most of our vegetables are grown for the winter.
Well, to kind of give you a better understanding of how bad this drought has been, our water well went dry at the house.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. And so because I have breeding seasons for my bulls, from my herd, I had to turn around and let my bulls out with my cows. So they're going to have summer calves, some of them.
So you couldn't take a shower or wash dishes. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, this is I don't live at that place, but yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, because like where I live in Katy, which is an outskirt of Houston.
Okay.
But
why didn't you just tell me you lived in Katy? I know where that is. Like,
yeah,
Howlettsville and all these other little towns. Like, I don't know where the hell that's at. But yeah, Katy, yeah. I know where that's at. It's like Fort Hood, right?
No, that's like it's on the west side of Houston.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, because my buddy, he lives down the road, and I'll shower his place when I go out there.
But, wow. we had we had some friends we were in an executive link program with that let's see, how do I tell this story without any identifying details? Let's just say they were in Northeast Colorado, and they had a fairly small operation, and they'd been there. After they'd been there about a year, they had to drill another water well, and it wasn't that great. And then they got, like, the property they had came with a water right from another property north that they got to use, and they had water at their house, you know, the barn and the guest house. And one of their first concerns was, well, how do we do this? You know, how do we build this business? And I said, like, so hold on here. You moved in there, and a year later, one well went dry. So you start getting water from the other one, and it's dropped 15 feet in the last couple of years. How are you guys going to run a feedlot and raise cows if you don't have water there?
Right.
And they just kind of stopped. And, you know, over the next couple of months, they went back and they, you know, went back through their well logs and did some work on their water wells. And they came back to the next meeting and were like, yeah, we're worried about the water. We're probably going to sell the place.
Right.
And they're in Nebraska now.
Wow.
And, you know, I get that, like, Eastern Colorado is a totally different scenario than where you're at. But I think the important thing to say here is we've mismanaged water in a lot of the country. And, you know, it's one thing to run out of grass in a drought.
It's another thing to run out of water.
Yeah, that's a much, much bigger deal. And
it is.
You know, we talk about drought proofing the ranch with grazing planning. Another huge part of that is drought proofing the ranch with infrastructure. I mean, we've been talking about drought all the episode.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and bullshit anybody and say my creeks are fine, because they're not. They're hurting. My ponds, okay, stock tanks, they're all hurting too.
Right.
3 to 4 feet low, which isn't a big deal when all your shit is 15 feet deep.
Right.
You know, if your pond's only 5 feet deep and it's 4 feet low, I get that's a problem. But
yeah,
you know, all the ponds on the ranch are fairly young, and they're not full of dirt, and they were designed to be deep to be able to, you know, to be able to live through droughts like this. So
right.
And drought proofing the ranch for me is let's see if I can do this off the top of my head cold. I've got 29 tanks. I've got 9 different pumping stations and 8 water systems. I've got 2 storage locations, and each storage location I store about 20,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't have to rely on groundwater to water my cows, is the moral of the story, because ponds go dry, creeks go dry. If my water wells go dry, there will have been signs that they're going to be in pain. Like, my ponds will have to be dry for a long time before I'm going to lose my water, or lose my water wells. So, but that being said, you know, I just learned to not rely on a creek or a pond. And so that's my emergency grass.
Yeah.
I still have grazing around my ponds. I still have grass around my creeks. And I've deliberately saved that in case I do have a major water system failure.
Right.
You know, in a better year, that might not be so much of a component in the plan.
Right.
But these last 2 years, I've had to make sure I've left grazing where I could get to it if I had a major water problem.
Right. I mean, from the bull sale that we had, I lucked out. I mean, that's going to pretty much pay our way for drilling a new well.
Hey, there's somebody at my door. I will be right back.
All right.
It was just FedEx dropping something off. They felt the need to knock on the door extra loud today for some reason. That'll happen. You know, when you live 20 miles from town and somebody knocks on your door middle of the day, you should probably go see who that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's weird because, like, if I'm at my parents' house in the middle of Houston, someone knocks on the door, it's like whatever. But, like, if I'm at the ranch and someone knocks on my door, I get a little I'm like, okay, well, what is that? You
Yeah.
know,
What are you doing in my driveway? How did you
right?
get here?
You know,
It's a it's a little different out at the ranch.
it is
So,
because I mean, you don't know. It could be anybody. You know,
well, I live off of a back road. I
yeah,
mean, it's a paved road, but it's still a back road. I mean, it's pretty much only locals. It's not really a through road.
right.
But where the ranch is down on the highway, US Highway 160 cuts right through the place.
Mm-hmm.
And headquarters, where my dad lives, where the shop is, where my pens are, it's on the highway.
Oh
Like,
wow.
it's right on the highway. And I it hasn't happened in a long time since, people got GPS and, TomTom and MapQuest. But I remember there was a story my dad used to tell. It would have been, it would have had to have been earlier mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
That he was out on the porch one day just drinking a beer, and this fella rolls in like a Lincoln Town car.
Right.
And, they have this conversation, and this guy starts asking him, like, oh, where's the nearest fuel? Well, it's another 20 miles down the road. Where's the nearest hotel? It's another 20 miles down the road. And then the guy's like, well, where are the mountains? And dad's like, what? Well, these are the foothills, right? I'm close to the Rocky. I thought should be close to the Rocky Mountains, right? And dad's like, no, no, sir. You need to get back in your car and go another 7 hours if you think you're in the mountains. The guy
Right.
had no idea where he was. He was just driving west to go to the mountains to go to Colorado.
Hmm.
Like, no, you're about 7 hours short, pal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that guy might have been. He might have had all 6 cans of a 6-pack, just didn't have the plastic thingy to keep them all together.
Right.
Oh, all right, man. Is there anything you want to talk about today, or you ready to get out of here?
I think that about covers it, man. I really appreciate you bringing me on here. It's the first time I've ever been on a podcast, so I'm pretty happy about it.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. It's been fun. You got good equipment. You got, I always love it when the video pops up and my guest has a microphone in front of them and headphones on, because I know it's going to be a good interview.
Yeah, yeah. So I appreciate it, man. It's I hope to be on here again sometime for sure.
Yeah, a year or so down the line, make some changes,
Right,
get some positive things going on. Love to have you
right,
back on.
for sure, brother.
Between now and then, other
Mm.
than Rancher John on TikTok, where can people find you?
So I have Rancher John on Instagram. Uh and then Tipton Beef Masters on Facebook is my cattle page.
Okay.
And yeah. And then Jonathan Tipton on Facebook if you want to find my personal page.
Okay. I don't always list my personal page everywhere. People will
Right.
find that sucker anyway.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah. People well like cuz I have a lot of cattle people that are within the Beefmaster breed on that page, so
I like to tell people, if you want to follow what I'm doing at work and the ranch stuff and the cows,
right.
come to Red Hills Rancher. If you
Yeah.
want me to fill up your Facebook wall with libertarian propaganda, friend me on Facebook.
Right, right, right. I mean, I don't usually accept friend requests from people I don't know, so I mean, but
I don't either, but when you get friend requests with like 50, 60, 150 mutual friends, it's like,
I gotta know you from somewhere or something, or at least know of you. But yeah, I mean, so I wanted I didn't want to make my personal Instagram like where people could find me, so I made a Rancher John page on Instagram for my kind of like my public account for, you know, agricultural content, pretty much similar to what I do on TikTok. I mean, a lot of my videos on that page, I've saved the video from TikTok and turn around and put it on there.
it's a lot
So
easier to go that way with videos than to make an Instagram video work on TikTok.
yeah, because you can't really save videos on Instagram like that.
And their
Or
editing tools suck.
yes, Yes. So, but yeah, that's and then go like my Beefmaster Cattle business page at Tipton Beefmasters on Facebook and on Instagram as well.
All right. I'll make sure they all get in the show notes along with try to find a I'll try to find a link for the Bondsman book. If you want me to message you that, I can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
And
for sure, please.
The Lassiter Philosophy of Beef. And
It's Lassiter Philosophy of Cattle Raising.
I'll get it. It'll be
Yeah.
there.
Right.
All right, man. Let's get
All
out of
right.
here.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yep. Y'all have a great week.
Yes, sir. You too.